Do you remember this? The brown era of video games, or how some people call it, the filter era. A time from the mid-2000s to the early 2010s when games began to look the same. We'll cover what influenced this trend, the games that popularized this look, and what led to the end of this era. The late 90s and early 2000s marked the beginning of 3D gaming, joined by an array of colorful and memorable titles. 3D technology wouldn't reach mainstream adoption until the release of the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64.
You guys busy?
Considering how popular Mario is,
See these three guys right here? Who are they? Okay, if you don't know who that one is or that one is, how about that one? Do you know who that one is?
Super Mario.
Their popularity and increased processing power expanded the horizons of developers. While 3D was a leap in graphical fidelity, it did not mean that games were quite yet realistic. Some of the 90s best looking games, while amazing for their era, still had angular models and low resolution textures. It simply was not possible to achieve true realism with the technology developers had. Due to this, many titles resorted to stylized visuals that meshed well with the medium's capabilities. Some examples include Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker and its more childish cel-shaded look, SSX and its cast of colorful characters, and Kingdom Hearts, whose inclusion of Disney characters justifies the more cartoony proportions of its characters. I mean, look at Sora's shoes. The abundance of style and vibrant colors can also be explained by the demographic of the era. For the majority of the 1990s, video games were primarily targeted at young boys, so it only makes sense that colorful and playful releases dominated the scene. However, all these vibrant titles would nearly go extinct due to a real-world catastrophe.
Falling out the other side.
Let's head back to
I'll go closer and then up.
Okay, good.
On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
There was an instant tonal shift in American mainstream media. Gone were the carefree days of yesteryear. In its wake were the dark clouds of a war on terror. The incident and its repercussions echoed in the minds of American citizens, and this would be reflected in Hollywood. The success of films like Black Hawk Down and The Hurt Locker illustrated the hyper-militarism that began to take hold throughout American media. However, this gritty realism wasn't exclusive to war films. One can see this in the contrast of 1997's Batman and Robin compared to 2005's Batman Begins. Batman went from being campy and colorful to a stern and realistic crime drama. These thematic and visual whiplashes are nothing new, for stylistic trends have always been cyclical. Design trends often react to previous trends, and in this case, gritty realism was the answer to the bold and colorful 90s, turning brown largely due to the influence of military footage from the Middle East. With this in mind, it was only a matter of time until video games began to adopt the very same look and feel into their virtual worlds. With the sixth generation coming to a close, console graphics were on the brink of evolution. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were far more powerful compared to their predecessors, offering unparalleled levels of graphics. Their respective releases in 2005 and 2006 not only marked the dawn of a new console generation, but also a stark shift in art direction. Gears of War was released in 2006 and acted as the first pillar for the brown era of video games. At the time, the game was heralded for its beautiful graphics, with IGN claiming that it's the most gorgeous looking game on the Xbox 360 Period. And who could argue with that? Gears of War set the standard for what next generation gaming looked like. It made the player feel a part of this war-torn world, a far cry from how it once looked. The game's gripping action and cinematic set pieces ingrained themselves into the minds of gamers. Such a formula would soon be adapted into a more modern setting. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare set the tone for the modern first-person shooter. Its stunning visuals, addictive gameplay, and genre-defining mechanics are only some of its lasting legacies. Despite being the best Call of Duty yet, it was still a product of the era. Looking at its color palette makes it clear it falls in line with the desaturated and monochromatic palette that was popular at the time. And to clarify, this game is not exactly as brown in tone as the other titles, but showcases the trend at large. Realism meant desaturated. Realism meant everything was doused in brown, beige, gray, or olive. Other FPSs looked very similar. Bad Company 1 and 2 featured similar palettes, as well as franchises like Resistance and Killzone. And how could I forget about Far Cry 2? Quite possibly the most brown game to exist. Even the cover alone advertises the various levels of brown you'll experience. But the true originator of the phenomenon can be traced back to a title from the previous generation. On January 11, 2005, the world witnessed a modern-day classic, Resident Evil 4, a pioneer of the over-the-shoulder genre filled with equal parts horror and action. It felt like playing a game ahead of its time. It made sense that it would be a commercial and critical success. In North America alone, the GameCube version sold a whopping 320,000 copies in the first 20 days. Metacritic had the PlayStation and GameCube versions as the top 2 rated games of 2005. Its widespread success made it a game to be analyzed and emulated by developers across genres, ultimately paving the way for the aforementioned desaturated and overly brown palettes of the 7th generation. Moreover, something all of these games have in common is not just their drab color scheme, but the context in which they use such visuals. Resident Evil 4 takes place in a remote mountain village. Both Gears of War and Modern Warfare set themselves in the midst of an all-out war, and so the overall tone and appearance should follow suit. These choices make the overall brownness make sense. Despite this, the same cannot be said about other titles. The success in subsequent years only reinforced the notion that if you wanted to sell a good game, it had to look like these 3 releases. Its effects were seen throughout the gaming landscape, with title after title adopting the realistic appearance. Need for Speed Most Wanted, a racing game, took this aesthetic and took it overboard. The difference between 2003's Need for Speed Underground and 2005's Most Wanted is immediately evident at a glance. Even the cover exhibited this symptom. GTA 4 in 2008 was also another victim of this, especially when you compare it to the more neutral GTA 5. It's also interesting to see how established franchises shifted entire visual identities to ride this wave. A key example is the aforementioned Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. What originally went from a cute cel-shaded style took a complete turn with Twilight Princess, exchanging the childlike aesthetic for one with more grit. The desaturation of video games was mostly an American phenomenon. Studios outside the United States continued to produce more colorful, playful, and stylized games. The Nintendo Wii was a huge success, and that includes its lineup of titles, from Wii Sports to Super Smash Bros. And literally any Mario game, all of which were free from the brown filter. But it wasn't just Nintendo. Square Enix had Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts 2. Sega had Yakuza 3 with its zany attire. Sony's very own Little Big Planet, developed by Media Molecule of Guildford, England, attempted to replicate the mascot mayhem that flooded the 90s. The fact that plenty of studios outside the US continued making lively video games showcases how the heightened militarism was a uniquely American phenomenon. A phenomenon in which the popular media of the time had to reflect what was seen on TV. The industry's adherence to this visual trend was so strong that certain titles started to poke fun at it. Uncharted 2 had a render mode simply called Next Gen Filter, and after turning it on, the game was drowned in brown, and the bloom and blur turned up an alarming amount. Just a mere 4 years later, fans and game developers alike grew tired of this palette. By the latter half of the 7th generation, gamers grew fatigued of the drab design choices that defined the era. Just like how the brown era was a reaction to the loudness of the 90s, a new trend began to emerge in response to gritty realism. Success began to look more like stylized releases such as Mirror's Edge in both Borderlands 1 and 2. And yes, you can definitely make the argument that Borderlands 1 is predominantly brown, but comparing its release visuals to beta footage shows that the franchise was nearly a victim of the gritty realism trend of the time. After all, it was thanks to its comic book and concept art visuals that separated the game and ultimately the franchise from the rest of the crowd. Minecraft began to crop up in 2010 and was finally released in 2011, taking the gaming world and the internet by storm. BioShock Infinite took a complete left turn with its setting and colors compared to its predecessors. Borderlands 2 expanded upon the visual identity of the first game and took full advantage of its unique look. These are only a handful of titles that define the post-Brown era, but all of which dove into their singular aesthetics. The rise of brown video games teaches us how video game trends can arise from anywhere, yet disappear in the blink of an eye. From the bold design language of the 90s to the more subdued and gritty visuals of the mid-2000s, video games have taken on all forms and shapes. But surprisingly, real-world tragedies have also had a hand in shaping the visual aesthetics of the games that we love. If it weren't for the success of Resident Evil 4, Gears of War, and Modern Warfare, then who knows what video games would have looked like back then. And it doesn't necessarily mean games with this overused look were bad. A lot of these games were phenomenal and broke new ground, but its use of gritty realism had to make sense in the context of the title. Video game trends will always be around. We are in the midst of a hyper-realism trend as we speak thanks to Unreal Engine. But what will video games look like come 2030 or 2040? What were your favorite brown games from the era? Let me know in the comments below.